I'm excited now because I have known this gentleman for a very long time. Well, not incredibly long, but pretty long, because at the time I had met this individual named Carrie Saratosky, who then I had co-authored a book with called Cause for Change, and she just left the Case Foundation, and I remember at that time I was working with her and Michael, who was at the Case Foundation at the time, talking about, we have this idea around this thing called MCON. So it was one of those too, besides the Gene Case and others there. Well, I'm excited to introduce Michael Smith. He's a special assistant to the president, the senior director of cabinet affairs for My Brother's Keeper, manages the president's initiative to address persistent opportunity gaps faced by boys and young men of color. Michael, thanks for being here with us.
Great to be here.
Well, yes, we'll clap a little bit. It's all right. So Michael and I are going to just talk back and forth about what's happening today with My Brother's Keeper, what's been going on. Of course, if you have any questions that you want me to ask on stage, you can do that through the social Q&A, and they'll bring an iPad here out for me to take a look at that. But that's at mcon.socialqa.com. So Michael, tell me a little bit about the background. How did you get to kind of where you are? Tell me the Michael journey.
How much time do we have?
Yeah.
So
well, they tell me 13 minutes.
So one, it really is amazing to be here, and congratulations to the incredible success and how MCON and your work has really helped to shape the conversation about millennials and activism and disrupting the status quo and making sure that we're engaging folks in new ways. So to see the other side of this story is incredibly exciting. So like my journey, like many of yours, completely improbable journey that I'd be sitting here representing the president and working at the White House. I grew up in Springfield, Massachusetts, which is a city of about 150,000 people. Sadly, although it's this idyllic New England town, it has a lot of troubles, struggling to find its way back with the changes in the economy. You know, one of these cities, sadly, that's last in everything good and first in everything bad. I grew up, my parents were both 16 years old when I was born. Our blue-collar neighborhood turned into a pretty bad neighborhood with the crack epidemic in the 80s. And so the fact that a kid that was born to a 16-year-old teenage mom would come working for the President of the United States is really unusual. And I would say what happened was my community surrounded me. Despite the challenges, I grew up in a Boys and Girls Club, spent every waking minute that I wasn't at school or at church at the Boys and Girls Club, and I was surrounded by mentors and people that decided to make a difference for me and root for my success. And it's a direct correlation for how I'm here. I found my way to the Case Foundation and was there for almost 8 years, working on the social innovation team at the Case Foundation, and there really exposed to the power of working with public-private partnerships. And we worked very closely with the Bush administration and then the Obama administration on innovation and technology and civic engagement. And they wooed me away to go run the Social Innovation Fund, which invests in evidence-based approaches to challenges in low-income communities. And while I was there, the president said, we need to do something about the challenges facing boys and young men of color. I don't have a big new idea, but we have to do something. I got a call saying he really didn't have the new idea, so why don't you come over and help us think about it, and that's how I ended up here. All
right, so before we get into some of the questions, what is My Brother's Keeper for those that may not know?
Yeah, so My Brother's Keeper is a program that's really trying to address the startling gaps in opportunity that face boys and young men of color, especially African American, Latino, and tribal young men of color. From the earliest ages, the gaps between those groups and their peers are gigantic. If you look at the fact that they're more likely to grow up in areas of concentrated poverty, you look at reading at grade level, where 80% of Black and Latino boys aren't reading at grade level. You look at the high school graduation rate. We just celebrated, we have 82% of our kids graduating from high school, which is wonderful. But you go to Black and Latino males and you're still down below 50%. We were just with a team from Rochester just a few years ago. They were graduating 9% of their Black boys. You know the story about interaction with the justice system. You know homicides. Black boys, for instance, are 6% of the nation's population, but nearly half of the nation's murder victims. And so the president was really concerned about these gaps and about the reinforcements that young men of color were getting. And not only from a moral obligation, but from an economic imperative. You cannot have a globally competitive America if you're just writing off so many people that we need their unique talents and gifts and resources to be fully productive in our economy. And so the president created My Brother's Keeper about 2 years ago to really tackle those issues. There's a federal policy component of it where we gave almost 80 recommendations to the president on what the federal government can do. We now have 250 My Brother's Keeper communities where communities are tackling these issues in all 50 states states and 19 tribal nations. And we've seen the private sector step up in a big way, more than $1 billion in aligned investment since My Brother's Keeper launched.
So what's been like the hardest thing, though? I mean, there's got to be some struggles. I mean, it sounds fantastic, but what's been the biggest challenges?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really big issue, and I think one of the tensions that we have with My Brother's Keeper is people want it to be simple. They want a simple solution, but we've been working on these
silver
issues.
Bullet, right?
They want a silver bullet. So people say, what is My Brother's Keeper? They'd like it to be mentoring. They'd like it to be a job placement program. But really what research shows is there are these 6 key milestones from the path from 0 to 24, whether it's entering school ready to learn, reading at grade level, graduating high school, successfully entering the workforce, and it takes all of those pieces working together, and we can't just choose one. So it's actually one of the challenges has been the complexity of the issue and really calling the nation to action to work simultaneously on all of these issues.
So you mentioned other partners, companies, philanthropic funds. What are they doing? Is it money? Is it resources? What?
Yeah, it's all of the above. The president called the nation to action like this isn't something that the federal government can do by itself. And so, on the private sector side of things, there's been a new nonprofit organization that has launched by the private sector to keep this work going in a long term. Just last week, we were with Kevin Durant. We launched this My Brother's Keeper Success Mentor Initiative, where 250,000 6th and 9th graders are going to be connected to school-linked mentors in the next 2 years. And Kevin Durant offered to build a basketball court, not by himself. He'll probably have construction people, but he's going to build a basketball court for the city that reduces chronic absenteeism the most in the next year. Will and Jada Smith announced the My Brother's Keeper Careers and Entertainment Tour, where they're going to go to a dozen cities across the country with their friends to expose them to behind the scenes careers. It's been mentorship program, it's been jobs programs, Citi, JP Morgan Chase, all sorts of folks stepping up, seeing what they could do about it. Philanthropy, there's an organization called the Executives Alliance for Boys of Color, more than 40 foundations that are working specifically on these issues. And then you can't forget the mayors, 250 mayors, tribal leaders, county executives that are doing great work and really calling regular folks to action, whether that's as mentors, as coaches, opening their business up for internships or apprenticeship. So it's really been an all-hands-on-deck effort.
Yeah, so the question here is around what happens after the administration. Does this die?
No, this doesn't die. This work, like so many of the efforts in the Obama administration, will continue cooking forward. We had the benefit in many ways that we started towards the end of the administration in 2014. So from the very minute that we were designing My Brother's Keeper, we were thinking about what's next. And so that's part of the reason why there's the My Brother's Keeper Community Challenge. And so in these 250 communities, there's an executive director, there's a task force, there's a multi-year plan, there's a budget. So that work will continue. The private sector has made multi-year commitments, as I said, over $1 billion. And probably one of the most important components is last year in the Bronx, the president was there to launch an organization called the My Brother's Keeper Alliance, more than $80 million in resources, and they're going to invest in these communities, and they're going to invest in evidence-based approaches that are working to close opportunity gaps for boys and young men of color. So it will keep going. And just last week we were with the president and our White House mentees, and the press pool came in, and the president just talked off the cuff about what this work means. And he said what he said a few times before, that My Brother's Keeper is not just work he and the First Lady are committed to until the end of the administration, but for the rest of their lives. So the work will keep moving forward.
One of the questions coming in on the social Q&A, head to MCONsocialqa.com, is can employers offer incentives for employees allowing them to mentor underserved youth?
Absolutely. I mean, there's all sorts of great work that's happening with corporations, corporate social responsibility, trying to figure out all sorts of fun incentives to keep people engaged. And so we're actually working with the NBA on the Mentor in Real Life campaign. Some of you may have seen the PSA that was airing during the playoffs with Steph Curry and the president. And so it's really interesting. It was the president teaching Steph a few things, including one of them was basketball. It worked most of the season.
Most of the season.
Most of the season. And what's really interesting is that campaign with the NBA, where the franchises are working with cities, where we've got these great PSAs going. The weekend the Steph PSA was released, we saw a 4,000% increase in traffic to mentor.gov. 4,000% increase. And we've seen actually a 30% increase in mentoring year over year. So, any company can connect with our communities. You can look at our private sector partners and figure out the types of things that you can do to get folks involved. But, from my time at Case, what I learned is incentives are nice, but the first thing is asking. People want to be asked, and people want an easy way to engage. So once you figure that out, you probably don't need a whole lot of incentives because people want to figure out a way, as you all know, to make a difference for kids in their communities.
So this question has been voted the top one, so I need to ask it, otherwise they get a little angry with me. And that is, how much does My Brother's Keeper rely on input from young men of color themselves in designing the initiative and amplifying their voices?
It's a really, really important piece. So in a few different ways. One, almost all of the My Brother's Keeper local communities have a youth task force that's helping all of these My Brother's Keeper communities have to develop a local action plan. And so in many cases, the youth task forces are right at the table developing those ideas and strategies. We meet with the Opportunity Youth Network, which is an organization that is founded out of Aspen Institute and Youth Build. And so we're meeting with those young people all the time. And also the reason that the President and First Lady have the White House Mentorship and Leadership Program is because they want to walk the talk. And we have 40 kids, 20 boys and 20 girls that are paired with White House staff and then meet with the First Lady and the President all throughout the year because we want to make sure not only that we're walking the talk, but that we're hearing directly from young people about what this work means to them on a regular basis.
So in terms of failure, is there anything that you've tried at My Brother's Keeper that hasn't worked?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I have to say, when we first launched My Brother's Keeper, we started our first mentoring push. And that idea that says if you build it, they will come does not work. And so we had to find a really good partner like the NBA. Just saying, please go mentor doesn't work. But we needed a consistent campaign. We needed on-the-ground partners. We needed folks that could do technical assistance. And so, we can throw pasta at the wall and seize what sticks. It's good, to try and test new things. But yeah, there has been some rapid iterations since we've launched the program.
So the audience wants to know, what's been the biggest impact that you can talk to statistically, not just anecdotally?
Yeah, so goodness, so many different things that are happening right now. One, I should say, obviously, this program has been around for 2 years, so there's realistic expectations that we're not going to solve poverty. But I'll give you a couple different examples. So in Compton, one of their core strategies in their My Brother's Keeper program is reducing gang violence and homicides, and they started a program called Compton Empowered, which is a combination of jobs training and negotiating with former gang members, giving gang members jobs. They've seen a year-over-year reduction in homicides by 50% in Compton. Another example would be in Philadelphia through their My Brother's Keeper program. They started a school diversion program because they wanted to reduce in-school arrest. They've seen a 54% reduction in in-school arrest in I think the past year since they started their program. Another thing through our Success Mentor Initiative, this is just a number, but we just launched in January, and already our first 10 pilot cities have connected 8,000 kids with Success Mentors. So we're seeing, I'll give you one other one. We have a Rethink School Discipline effort to really change the way that schools are handling and oftentimes treating unfairly young men of color. They're suspended at higher rates. Their discipline is harsher than their peers. We have 40 school districts that are working with us. After our Rethink School Discipline Summit, Miami and Houston both got rid of external suspensions. And so we're already seeing some major movements that are leading to some long-term change.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so you've talked a lot about these different players that are involved, from whether they're the NBA, the entertainment industry, philanthropy, and corporations. Let's talk specifically about the for-profit and nonprofit sector. What do they have to do together to collaborate on this issue?
So, it's been interesting. It's been collaboration. It's been, some separate programming. So JP Morgan Chase is one of my favorite examples. They expanded their fellowship initiative where they take young men of color in their sophomore year of high school and they give them these incredible summer experiences. Their cohort is going to South Africa this summer. They pair them with a JP Morgan Chase mentor, and then they track them to and through college with the hope that these young men will come back to JP Morgan Chase or the banking industry. And so you're seeing some small examples of individual work like that. But you're also seeing the fact that when we launched the My Brother's Keeper Alliance, there wasn't a dime of philanthropic support. That was all the private sector saying, we want to stand up and do something about it. And you know, I mentioned this earlier, the President's Council on Economic Advisors put out a study that last year that showed if you were a black baby boy born 25 years ago, you have a 1 in 2 chance of being employed today. A 1 in 2 chance in America. And that's due to early death, incarceration, or other inequities in employment in the economy. That study, however, also showed if we could close the labor participation gap between black and Hispanic males and their peers, we would increase GDP by 2%. And so I think corporate America is realizing this isn't just a nice thing to do, this is a critical thing to do, and that's why they're stepping up.
Absolutely. So you mentioned 6 milestones for men aged 1 to 24. What are they specifically?
It's a quiz. So this research-based, you can look at Arnold Chandler's life course framework, but it starts with entering school ready to learn, then it goes to reading at grade level by 3rd grade. That's when you switch from learning to read to reading to learn, and it's a really huge challenge that we've got to do something about in the United States. Then it goes to graduating high school, ready for college and career. Then it goes to not only starting post-secondary or college, it's completing. We have a huge challenge, especially with young men of color who will start some sort of post-secondary work and they just can't make it through. And so we're seeing some interesting things to keep them on board. Then after post-secondary, it's successfully entering the workforce. And so we actually just announced about $20 million in Department of Labor grants that are going to summer and first jobs. You may have seen also a big push that we're doing with LinkedIn to connect small and medium enterprises to these kids. The president wrote about his first job at Baskin-Robbins. It's a great read. And then the 6th milestone is reducing violence and providing second chances. And then there are some overarching cross-cutting milestones or pieces like mentoring and also investing in evidence-based approaches.
This is an interesting question. What does the role of preserving the history of the African American community play in helping to drive change?
Say that one more time.
Absolutely. What role does preserving the history of the African American community play in helping to drive change?
You know, it's so important. If you look at many of the programs that have been successful around the country, like Becoming a Man in Chicago is a great example that has an incredible success. Part of it starts with building up the esteem and the self-worth of young men, of anybody. Knowing where you've been, knowing your history, knowing your stories of triumph, so that you can know when you encounter that battle that you have the tools in you, you have the warrior in you that you can break through it. And so many kids are getting negative reinforcement, don't know where they've come from, don't know their history. And so we're seeing so much work around the country that is about telling them where they've been, what they can do, really looking at powerful examples that have come before them. So it's so incredibly important. That's why we're excited about the launch of the African American History Museum. We're excited that we've got the American Indian Museum. We're excited about the Charleston Museum that's opening, and lots of different ways that people are engaging and learning about their culture. And you know, My Brother's Keeper looks at the opportunity gaps for black males, Latino males, tribal males are a huge component, and that is a really big thing that we're seeing in tribal communities across the country. Also some Asian American and Pacific Islander groups that share some of the same staggering disparities.
20 seconds. What do you want everybody to know about My Brother's Keeper and what they should do?
So realize that My Brother's Keeper matters to you, whether or not you are a boy or young man of color, or you are a friend of a boy and young man of color, a mother, a father, a sister, a brother of a boy and young man of color. This is about America's story. We cannot believe in our founding words if we do not also believe that it is our responsibility to help our neighbors' children succeed. America's story. The president actually said, when he was talking to a group of young men, he said, there's nothing, not a single thing that's more important to the future of America than whether or not you or young people like you can achieve your dreams. We've got to get this right, and there's a role that all of you can play in it. So go to whitehouse.gov/MBK, find your community, whether it's here or in your neighborhood, and see how you can get involved. Go to mentor.gov, become a mentor. And if you can't commit to being a mentor for a year or 2 years, think about having young people shadow you, thinking about going back to your school, speaking to, inspiring. All of you have incredible ideas, have had great successes, and you never know the difference that you can make in the life of a person behind you.
Great. Mike, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it.